you can draw this in Procreate. You can draw this city skyline at sunset in Procreate. All you have to do is follow this tutorial all the way till the end. During this tutorial, we will be using some free brushes which you can get through freefromflow.com. And yes, it's totally free. And you won't just be getting these brushes, but also my ebook about color theory and lots of other Procreate freebies. And once you have followed this tutorial all the way till the end, then don't forget to share your work on Instagram and tag me in the image, not just in the description, and that way I will be able to find your work and perhaps we'll see it in the next video. The canvas we're working on is 2300 pixels by 3000 pixels. And I have set the color profile to sRGB. I have also created a color palette in case you want to use the exact same colors as I'm using. You can download those through the link in the description, and yes, that's free as well. Now let's get started. First thing we'll do is we'll drop a color onto the first layer, layer 1. Let's go to the color palette and we'll use that first color in the color palette and we will drag it onto the canvas to fill it entirely. Now we'll go to the brushes and use the soft brush, which you can find under airbrushing. And we'll pick the next color. We will pick this bright red, that second color in the color palette. I have the opacity of this brush set to 70%. And for the size, let's go for 15%. And we are going to make these horizontal strokes near the top, adding some red to our canvas. Something like this. Then we'll switch to the next color, the third color in the color palette, this orange. And we'll drop that a little bit lower, around here. And then finally, we'll grab this yellow, that fourth color in the color palette, and make a horizontal line here. So we are creating a nice gradient here. And this gradient, it might not look very smooth, but we can fix that. We can go to the magic wand here in the menu and go to Gaussian blur and set it to layer. Now if you slide to the right with your pen or your finger, you can blur this layer. Let's go for 24%. And then just click the magic wand again to get out of that menu. Now we are going to start creating our city skyline, and we are going to cover the lower 2/3 of the canvas with buildings. And I have created special brushes for that, and you can find them in the treasure chest. And if you are already subscribed to the treasure chest but you can't see these new individual brushes, then do be sure to clear your browser cache. But before we drop in our buildings, let's create a new layer on top of our background layer. We'll click the plus for a new layer and let's go to the treasure chest. The treasure chest brushes. And here you can see I have a variety of building brushes. Let's get started with building number 4. And for our color, we will pick this first color in that second row. The size of the brush is set to 8% and the opacity is at 100%, of course, because we don't have transparent buildings. All right, now let's start at about, well, just above that center point of our canvas. And then just make a random row to the right, just some random buildings. And then we'll switch to, let's switch to building number 2. I have the size set to 8% as well here. And now let's just drop in some random buildings so that we have some random building shapes. Now let's switch to building number 1. Let's check the size. Let's go for 7%. And let's drop in a couple of these. So that it's nicely filled. Now we'll want this bottom part to be filled with the same color as well. You can do that by going to the selection tool, that's the S shape ribbon. Set it to rectangle and to color fill. if you make a selection of that bottom part, it'll immediately fill with the color that you have selected. I'll just select this part as well because we have a little hole over there. Now everything is filled and we can click that S-shaped ribbon again. Next we are going to create a new layer on top. Let's go to the layer menu by clicking the two little squares and then click the plus for a new layer. We are going to add more buildings, but we are going to pick the next color in the color palette. We are going to make the brush just a little bit bigger. Let's go for, what is it, 10%? Let's drop in a couple of these. Before we switch to another building brush, let's pick building 3 this time. You can just vary the buildings. Let's go for 10%. And just make these buildings a little bit lower than that first line. I'm going to make this brush a little bit bigger. 16%. And now let's switch to building number 4. Make that a little bit bigger as well. 15%. And just fill these gaps. I think this is looking good. Now we can use that selection tool again. So go to the S-shaped ribbon. And we still have it set to color fill. And we can just make a selection of that bottom half to fill that area. And then click the S-shaped ribbon again to get out of that menu. Or click it again to really get out of the menu. Alright, let's do this again. Let's go to the layer menu again. Click the plus for a new layer. And go to the third color in the color palette. We'll make the buildings a little bit bigger as we move to the front. You can play around with the size a bit. Let's try 28% and make some bigger buildings here in the front. Let's switch to building number 3. Make it bigger, 30%. And you can make them overlap a little bit. I think this is too high. You can just play around. Let's go for building number 2. Make it bigger, 25. And finally, building number 1. Make it a bit bigger, 19% perhaps. And now it's nicely overlapping those other buildings. And again, you can use that selection tool to make sure that that bottom area is completely filled as well. And then just click the S-shaped ribbon again. And let's make a new layer. Let's click the plus again and move to the next color. That's the 4th color in the color palette. We'll continue making more and bigger buildings. Let's start with building number 2. But of course you don't have to use building number 2. You can pick your own buildings. Let's click about here. I'm focusing on that center area. Let's pick building number 1 as well. Make it a bit bigger, 32. And let's just fill these sides. You can use the selection tool to remove some gaps. And then click the S-shaped ribbon again. We'll move forward, make a new layer, click the plus. And let's move to the 5th color in the color palette. As you move forward, you might want some more control over your buildings and where they are placed. Let's start with building number 4 first. Let's make it bigger, 44%. And you can place your building and then go to the move tool. That's the little arrow over here. And you can move your building around until it's placed where you want it to be. And then click the arrow again. If you want to do this with the buildings in front, then do be sure that you make a new layer every time you place a new building. So let's click the plus for another building. Let's go for building number 3 this time. Let's make it bigger, 45%. And then go to the arrow. And I want to make it even bigger. Do be sure that when you make it bigger that you turn on uniform. Let's go for something like this. And then we can make another layer for more buildings. Let's use building number 1 as well. Let's make it bigger, 55. That's really big. I'll make it smaller by using that move tool. And I want to place it over here. And if you're having trouble, if you want to reduce the amount of layers you have, then you can just merge these layers, of course. These layers, these buildings that are in front. If your layers want to merge. I really don't like the system. Okay, they are merged. Let's make a new layer on top for even more buildings. I'm going to make another building number 1. Let's drop it in and move it by using the move tool. I want to place it nice and high up here. And I want to flip it. Let's place it over here. Then let's make a new layer, more buildings. Let's go for building number 2. Make it a bit bigger, 60%. Or perhaps a little bit smaller. You can just play around with that. Let's place it over here and click the arrow. And another layer. Let's click the plus. And let me use building number 4 again. Now let's just fill this area. I think this looks nice. Let's merge these layers again. Let's hope that they want to merge. Yes. Then click the plus for a new layer for our final buildings. We'll switch to that last color here in this row. And let's start with building number 2. Let's place it and then move it around. I want it to be in front here. Over here. Then click the arrow to get out of that menu. And then click the plus for a new layer. And go to building number 1. Let me drop that in. And then move it to the bottom here. I want it to be in front of those other buildings, covering them a little bit. About here, and then just click the arrow to get out of the menu. Next, let's add the sun to our sunset scene. We'll want that sun to be behind the buildings. So let's go to the layer menu and click layer 1 to place that layer between the background and the buildings. Let's click the plus. And for our brush, we will go to the calligraphy brushes and use the monoline brush. And let's pick this first color over here. Now draw a circle and hold your pen in place. Now tap one finger on the screen to make it snap to a perfectly round circle. And then drop in the color to fill your shape. Now let's pick the arrow and move it. Want to move it down a little bit until it's about over here so that these buildings are covering our sun. Then click the arrow again and let's duplicate this layer. You can do that by sliding to the left and clicking duplicate. Then let's go to the magic wand and use Gaussian blur set to layer. Slide to the right with your pen or finger. And let's go for about 16.2%. And to make this effect more visible, you can duplicate this layer a couple of times. You can slide to the right, or to the left actually. You can slide to the left and click duplicate. You can do this about 3 times and then merge these layers. Now I'd like to add a yellow glow behind our sun. So again, we'll have to click layer 1 and then click the plus so that that layer is below our sun. Then for the brush, we will go to the airbrushing brushes again and use the soft brush. And for the color, we will pick this bright yellow here at the top. And now gently add some yellow glow to our sun and also to this horizon. Let's make the brush a little bit smaller, let's say 7%, and let's make some horizontal strokes here to the sky as well, just to add some interest. Then you can blur it a little bit by going to Gaussian blur, set it to layer, and slide to the right. Let's go for 12.9%. And then go to the layer, click the N, and slide to the left to make the effect a little bit less visible. Let's go for 65%. Now we are going to use that yellow to add a little bit of mist to our scene. We are going to do that between the buildings. Let's first go to layer 2. That's the buildings in the back. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger, 12%, and let's just make horizontal strokes to add a little bit of mist there. And we'll do the same for layer 3. Make these horizontal strokes. And we'll do it for layer 4 as well. Just a little bit. Now we are going to make a layer on top of layer 5. Click layer 5, then click the plus, and let's set this layer to color dodge. We are going to use this layer to add a nice sunset glow. For the color, we will use this second color over here, that nice red, and we'll make the brush a little bit bigger. Let's go for 25%. And let's start here near the sun. And let's just add some glow to the city. You can see that it's starting to look a bit more reddish. Giving it a nice warm glow. Now I'd like to add a couple of birds to the scene. I think they'll add a little bit of interest. Let's click the plus for a new layer. And for the brush, let's go to the calligraphy brushes and use the brush pen. And for the color, we will pick this last color over here. And with the brush pen, if you press harder, you will get a thick stroke, and if you press lightly, it'll be more thin. I have the opacity of this brush set to 100% and the size is at 10%. And now start adding some stylized birds to your scene. Make them very small here near the sun. And start at the center of the bird, pressing a little bit harder, and then press lightly as you move outwards. And we're just making very simple birds, very stylized shapes. Make sure you vary their size. And continue until you have a nice variety like this. Now finally, let's add some windows to our buildings. I have created a special brush for that as well. It's very simple actually. Let's go to the treasure chest brushes and use the rectangles 2 brush. And what it does, it makes rectangles. And rectangles look like windows on these buildings. Let's create a new layer on top of all the others. And if at this point you can't make enough layers, what you can do is just merge these layers together. Like these buildings over here or these sun layers, you can just merge them and work on this new layer to create the windows. For the color, we are going to pick this second color here at the bottom. Let's start with some windows over here. The brush opacity is set to 100% and the size is set to 12%. Now let's start over here and draw a line down. And then hold your pen in place to make it snap to the quick shape. And then hold your finger on your screen to make it perfectly vertical. And then right next to it, let's make another line. Hold your pen in place. And your finger on the screen to make it perfectly vertical. Let's make another one over here. Hold your finger on the screen. And now let's move to the building on the left. Let's use the other rectangles brush for that. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger. Let's go for 20%. Let's start over here. Go down, hold your pen in place. Hold one finger on your screen for that perfectly vertical line. And continue making these rows of windows. Now if you want these to align nicely, you can actually select them by going to the selection tool, the S shape ribbon, turn off color fill, and use rectangle to select these windows. Then drag your 3 fingers down and click duplicate. Now you can drag this to the right and have more windows. And then click the arrow again. And you can actually easily duplicate this duplicate by dragging down with 3 fingers again and clicking duplicate again. And then drag that one to the right as well. I think we have enough windows on this building. Let's click the arrow and let's just merge these layers with windows on them. Let's add some windows to this building as well. Let's make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's go for 10%. And let's start over here, drag down, hold your finger on your screen, and let's make another line. And let's make some windows over here as well using that other brush again, the rectangles too. I'll make the brush smaller. Let's go for 8%. Let's start over here. Drag down, hold your pen in place and your finger on the screen. Let's make 2 lines. I feel like these lights are a little bit too bright, so let's lower the opacity of these lights. Let's go to the layer menu, click the N, and turn down the opacity a little bit. Let's go for 60%. But now I feel like these lights here in the back that they need to be even less bright. If you want to adjust the opacity of just a part of your layer, you can go to the selection tool, the S shape ribbon. Now let's select these windows. And then when you go to your layer, you can click the layer with 2 fingers to open the opacity option. Now you can just slide to the left to lower the opacity of this selection. Let's go for 23.8%. And then you can just click the S shape ribbon and the magic wand to get out of that menu. Now of course, around sunset, not everyone is still at work in these buildings, so let's turn off some windows. I'm going to show you an easy trick to do that. You can go to the layer menu again, click layer 14 and use mask. Now with this layer mask, if you paint on it with black, you will mask parts of that layer which it is attached to. Now we are going to add that black by using the selection tool. Let's click the S shape ribbon, use rectangle, and then color fill. Now if we set color fill to black, we can use that selection tool to put black on that layer mask. And now you can see that when I make a selection of these windows, they will disappear. They will be masked by that black. So let's go ahead and turn off some lights using that selection tool. If you are enjoying this tutorial, then do be sure to check out my other You Can Draw This video tutorials as well. There's really a whole bunch of them. And once you are finished following all of those tutorials and you still can't get enough, then do be sure to check out my Patreon page. There I share a lot of Procreate tutorials ranging from beginner level tutorials to more advanced tutorials. So that's the thing to think about while turning off all these lights. Just be sure that you do leave some lights on, of course. And once you feel like you've turned off a nice amount of lights, you can just click the S-shaped ribbon to get out of that menu. And if you want to remove some more, or if you have some little lines left like I have here, then you can just click the S-shaped ribbon again and just continue making these selections to mask parts of these lights. And then just click the S-shaped ribbon again. And that's it. You have created a city skyline at sunset. I hope you have enjoyed following this tutorial and that you have learned some new techniques in Procreate. I want to thank you for watching, and I will see you next week for the next You Can Draw This video tutorial.